So I get this question asked a lot. What were the pivotal points in your business career, real estate career, that really helped you be able to scale? In 2013, I had 1 unit. Today I have 3,500 and I own them all. I can look back to 4 really crucial points in my real estate career that exponentially grew everything from wealth to cash flow, but most of all from buying properties. And the first is in the beginning, probably the first 3 to 4 years, I really started to look at not properties as properties anymore, but as businesses. And this may seem ridiculous, but just think about this for a second. You know, in the beginning, when you're buying a property, you're looking at that property, that asset, and you're comparing it to other assets. So I'd be looking at a duplex or a 4-unit, and I'd be looking at only the price per unit or what these properties were going for. And even when you get an appraisal, right, there's a thing called comp sales. And that is the comparable sales in a certain area for a duplex or for a 4-unit or for whatever you're buying. And what are they trading at? There is another thing called the income approach, which assesses an income producing piece of real estate as its value or its worth is how much cash flow it produces, how much net operating income that piece of property produces. When I started thinking about the property and what it's worth, it made so much sense to me. Because if you have one property here and it's an 8-unit, and another property here that's an 8-unit, and all things are about the same except for property B has net cash flow, has net operating income of $100,000, and property A has $50,000, which one would you pay more? Well, obviously you'd pay more for the one that is producing more income. And that's why you value it at a higher price. So when I learned that, and I started understanding cap rates and that properties can be a business, it exponentially changed my mindset about how I can value businesses and grow the value. You know, not hope that the value goes up, not count on appreciation. I can force NOI through adding value to my residence or to the property that would exponentially increase income or decrease expenses. And that was groundbreaking for me because as I looked for new properties and the properties I've already acquired, I would look for key ways that I can increase the NOI. And that leads me into groundbreaking thing number 2 that I really started to understand is that in business, you need systems if you really want to scale. And I see this a lot in real estate, right? There's a lot of people that are like, oh, we need to send out a rent renewal, so I'll just send out a rent renewal. Oh, a tenant's not paying their rent, so I'm going to message them or call them and see what's going on. You know, maintenance request is just texted in. Rent checks are just picked up. Anything that happens on that property, if it is a business, you should think of it as a system. So if you need to do a rent renewal, you should think about, well, how do I do a rent renewal for all of my properties? When should I do a rent renewal? How much? Should I incorporate things that are beyond rent? Should I be talking about other income? For example, this person has a pet. Should I make sure I incorporate a pet policy? If you notice that a lot of your properties have trash around there and there's no way to hold the tenant accountable to trash, do you implement a trash policy? So there's different systems that you can implement, not just for one property, but for all of your properties. And for me, really scaling is when I stopped just doing the things that needed to be done to my properties and started looking at them as businesses and thinking about, well, if I have to do this now, how do I make this a reoccurring system that can be done by me or somebody else on my team that is the best system that I can think of? And that is a great way to be able to scale, become more efficient, and drive more value. Next thing that I learned that really helped me scale is looking at a property and how to negotiate it, not just when it comes to price, but when it comes to terms. So when I first started investing in real estate, I would just like, this costs X, you just negotiate the price and then you buy it, right? You put 20 to 25% down, and that's exactly what I did. But as I started learning more and more about real estate, I started to realize that there's this other thing called terms, where you can negotiate amortization rates, you can negotiate interest rates. Instead of just paying principal and interest, maybe you only pay interest with the bank. It's called IO, interest only for a period of time. Well, obviously, if you're repositioning an asset and you're spending a lot of the cash flow and your own money on making the property better, why would you want to pay principal down? You would only want to pay interest. And then what really opened it up is there's a lot of creative ways to be able to get into the asset. You could have the owner seller finance the whole thing. You could have the owner seller finance at 20%. You can have the owner do small interest only payments. You could have the owner finance or give credits. There's so many different ways to be able to structure a deal well beyond price, to the point that I realized that price is actually secondary to terms. And in most real estate transactions now, I'm the one looking at the terms, not the price at all. And that has helped me be able to exponentially buy more, especially since I'm keeping all the equity. I don't have partners and I don't do syndication. So for me, liquidity and having the finances available to be able to acquire properties was very, very needed. So by figuring out how to negotiate and get creative with my deals, after I understood how to operate them, because that was number one, exponentially helped me be able to grow. I mean, I remember an entire year where I bought 400 units in 1 year and did not have to put down payments down. I mean, every single deal, I did some sort of creative financing. And that brings me to number 4. I started to understand that the real way to make money wasn't just systems with your property management company, wasn't creative finance to be able to get into the properties, wasn't just looking at the current NOI. It was thinking about how fast I can reposition each property. And I realized that the faster you can reposition a property, the lower the risk and the higher the return. For example, if you really think about the fact that a property is sitting here as is when you bought it, and you just run it really, really well, well, that's great. You can increase the NOI by just running it better. But what happens if you could rehab every single unit and significantly increase the rent? What happens if you could update the common areas? What happens if you could update the look and the feel of the entire building and change the culture by putting in not only better renters, but also upgrading what the renters are getting? So by thinking through the fact that I can actually spend money on a property to be able to make money, and I can do that relatively quickly, that exponentially grew my ability to buy more properties, because then what I would do is I'd buy the asset and I'd think of a really good plan and how to execute that plan as fast as possible. In fact, sometimes before closing, I'd be rehabbing properties already, just so I could have that property ready to be able to lease so I could test market rents and then see if my plan or my business strategy was sound or adapt my business strategy. And then we would figure out how to rehab the rest of the property or rest of the units as quickly as possible, which would exponentially change the value. And then when it changed the value, I would be able to refi not only my money I had to put down to buy the asset, but all the money I put in with CapEx plus some. So now my returns turn to infinite. I take the money that I got refied out and I go buy it again. But this last point here, I could probably talk about for hours. If you can learn how not just to operate the property, but to look at how the business is currently running here, and then see a clear path with some CapEx and some money in between to be able to run the business like this, that significantly increases the NOI, which would significantly increase the value of the building, there is a ton of money to be made. In fact, that is where the most money can be made in real estate and in business. You are transitioning the business to be more profitable and in return, more valuable. Therefore, banks and lenders will be much more willing to be able to give you more debt, which that helps you be able to take your money back out and be able to do it over and over and over again. Now, it sounds simple, but obviously you got to implement things like rehabbing units in 72 hours, because that's how fast we rehab units. Or how many units can you rehab before closing? Or is your business strategy sound? Did you hit the right market rents? And then all while doing that is transitioning the business, i.e. the real estate, seamlessly, so it's not a construction zone for the 2 years that you're doing this. And if you can do that in, let's just say, 1 year, 2 years versus 4 or 5 years, you are not just making a lot more money, but I was lowering my risk, because if I can get my money back sooner, my money is not sitting in the property longer, and then anything that happens in the external economic environment, like interest rate rising, you're able to capitalize on before those things that you can't control happen. So those are the 4 things, right, that have really helped me exponentially be able to grow and scale. And if you really focus on looking at your property as a business, not doing anything without thinking about implementing a system afterwards, thinking about terms more than price to be able to get into the real estate, and then lastly, really focusing on the repositioning, taking your business strategy and bringing it to life at a stabilized value in a short amount of time, you can make an incredible amount of money without giving up a lot of the equity.